NBC's Matt Bradley is reporting from the Syrian capital. Peter Baker is the New York Times chief White House correspondent and an MSNBC political analyst. With me here in studio, Richard Haass, President Emeritus at the Council on Foreign Relations, senior counselor at Centerview Partners, and author of the weekly Substack newsletter, Home and Away. It's great to have all of you here. Matt, Secretary Blinken was in the capitals of Turkey and Iraq today. He's expected to visit Jordan tomorrow. What do we know about those conversations and the transition that's underway where you are in Syria right now?
Yeah, well, we're seeing that trip, more diplomacy by Antony Blinken, who's been to the Middle East so many times in the past year and a half. And now he's focused on Syria. Those countries you mentioned are all bordering Syria. That trip to Iraq was a surprise. All of these meetings are focused on what is going on in this country, which was really, as far as we understand, it took the U.S. government and many governments throughout the world, including clearly the government of Syria, the regime of Bashar al-Assad, very much by surprise when within 2 weeks, rebels ousted the Assad regime after about 50 years. So what we're seeing now is Antony Blinken trying to rally American allies and partners to try to make for a secure transition here in Syria. That is a major priority, considering that this was where Islamic State was born during the revolutionary period here that lasted nearly 14 years. There were massive elements of al-Qaeda. This was a gateway through which many of the jihadis who went into Iraq during the American occupation of Iraq passed over those porous borders between Syria and Iraq in order to attack American troops there. So that's why we're hearing that this is such an explosive and potentially dangerous country, not just for its own citizens, but for the entire region. And that's why you're seeing all of these partners so involved in its fate. Now, this is a complicated bit of diplomacy, but for folks here on the ground here in Damascus, this wasn't complicated at all. There was huge celebrations today all across this city, called for by the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. That is the militant Islamist group, the rebel group that overthrew the dictator Bashar al-Assad. And we saw these celebrations throughout this city. They were really, I spoke with some people, they didn't really seem to see a lot of complications. They didn't have any suspicions or fears about the future of this country. They laid all of the difficulties that they have endured on Bashar al-Assad's feet and said that everything is going to be fine now, despite the fact that it is really Islamists who are in charge. Own connections in the past to al-Qaeda. But now that they have peace here in Syria, there's also a real desire for justice. And just yesterday, I was in the town of Ghouta, which is in the southeastern part of Damascus, just southeast of this capital city. And I spoke with victims of a sarin gas attack from more than 10 years ago. And here's what they had to say.
بس انت خايف من المستقبل يعني ازاي شو تتوقع من المستقبل؟
نصر جديد ان شاء الله. انا بحكي يعني عندما سقط النظام اشعر فرح جدا رائع، لانه يوجد هناك العديد من الشهداء والضحايا الذين قتلوا بسبب كرسي، ولكن مع الاسف نحن قطعنا الامل هذا، قطعنا الامل، ولكن نامل اداره جديده ان تحاكم هذا الطاغيه.
And I can tell you, Chris, that the people here in Ghouta and throughout this country, they're looking to the international community for that justice and to the United States and the incoming Trump administration.
Thank you so much for that. So, sarin gas, Richard, and Syria under Assad has admitted, this is what they've admitted, to making 360 tons of mustard gas, 5 tons of the precursors to sarin. Right now, it's not clear how much of that exists, where it exists, right? Is it hidden somewhere? Is it possible to find it? What's the most efficient way to find it? That's just one, I think, element of what, we're calling a complicated bit of diplomacy here.
Yeah, I mean, sarin gas and the rest is one of the reasons Israel's doing what it's doing, which is destroying some known stocks. But there's an enormous amount of chemicals that are unaccounted for. And we don't know if they're destroyed, still hidden, gotten into the wrong hands, potentially getting into the wrong hands. It's one of the 86 reasons that, as happy as we are to see the old regime go, it's a little bit soon to take out the champagne. And this is one area. You've got the potential revival of terrorism in Syria. You've got potential for civil conflict. We could go on and on. So, as hard as it is to oust the regime, it's actually harder to put something positive in its place. And so in some ways, the real struggle for Syria now is only beginning.
Yeah, and the question is who's going to take the lead on making it go in the right direction, Peter. We mentioned Tom Friedman's editorial in your paper, and he suggested if Marco Rubio becomes Secretary of State, as is expected, right? I'm sorry? Did you say something? Okay. His job may be to persuade Trump to abandon all of the isolationist America first, not sure we want to stay in NATO, who needs allies, who cares about S-hole countries rhetoric that Trump is known for. So you can help with, dare I say it, nation building in Syria. That's Tom Friedman. But is there any indication, Peter, that Trump would consider serious U.S. involvement in what becomes of Syria?
No, not if history's any guide. Remember, of course, in his first term, he tried mostly to get out of Syria, to turn it over to the Turks, let them do what they wanted with the Kurds, even though the Kurds have been our allies. This is, in fact, the issue that precipitated Defense Secretary Jim Mattis's resignation. And you saw in that social media post that President-elect Trump put out a week or so ago, that we should have absolutely nothing to do with Syria. Now, that suggests an understandable but not correct understanding of the situation where some other countries' problems are its problems alone and not ours. That is certainly something I think a lot of Americans sympathize with. Who cares about what other countries are having happen in their countries when we have a lot happening in our country? But we have seen now over the last 13, 14 years how Syria and its collapse over that time has impacted far beyond its borders, all the way to Europe. The migration crisis that has challenged European leaders across the continent is born, at least in part, out of the civil war that we've seen in Syria all these years later. And there's a reason why, as Richard just said, the Israelis are going in and trying to take advantage of the moment to get rid of some of these chemical stocks, to get rid of some of Syria's own military capacity, because they don't want, the instability to lead to yet another enemy on their borders, and an enemy who's, stocked with weapons that can hurt them. So there's a lot of consequences to what's happening there for the United States, and particularly for its allies, both in the Middle East and Europe.
And speaking of Israel, Richard, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is also in the Middle East. He's been shuttling between Israel, Qatar, Egypt, trying to get a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal done. Now, NBC News is reporting, Andrea Mitchell is reporting, that U.S. officials tell us that they are closer to a deal. They maybe have never been closer to a deal, that Hamas has dropped some of its demands. How optimistic are you that a deal can, first of all, get done? But could it get done before President Biden leaves office?
Look, it could get done. On the other hand, there's a little bit of a feeling of Lucy and the football. We've gotten close to deals before, only to have it yanked away. It takes only one side to start a conflict, in this case Hamas, but it takes both to end it, Israel and Hamas. You've got to come up with something both sides are prepared to live with. Hamas seems to be willing to accept a limited Israeli military presence in and around Gaza for at least some time. Hamas has come forward with a list of hostages and so forth. Israel presumably is prepared to release Palestinian prisoners inside Israel. So, yeah, I think there's a decent chance. I always thought, quite honestly, it would be more likely to happen after January 20th. I thought this might be something the Prime Minister of Israel would do for the 47th president rather than the incumbent. But, I think at some point it will happen. The real question then is what happens afterwards. Do you set up a political process that will allow an international force to come into Gaza? Do you set up a diplomatic process that would allow some Palestinian political aspirations to be addressed? So this is necessary, but no one should kid themselves. Even if we get such a deal, we still got a long ways to go. But like you and everybody, I'd love to see those hostages home.